I want to just, before we start, can I just say hi to Jesse and be a human? So I know Reese has like 3 kids. How about you?
Oh gosh, no.
No kids? No kids at all?
No kids. No bachelor.
He's in
for
a
life.
robe on a Tuesday morning. Yeah. Look at him.
You could. The kids could be at school. The wife could be working.
Don't run off to Canada. It's so boring there.
Hello and welcome to Canada's Boring. My name is Reese Waters, and with me is the remote and slightly ill Jesse Hardy.
Hello. Of course, we have this important podcast interview today, and I wake up with a small head cold. I'm like,
and he turns up on the video call with a robe to meet Chrystia Freeland. Welcome, Chrystia.
He's wearing the robe to prove he's feeling a little bit unwell. If he were like fully dressed up, we wouldn't believe him.
Exactly.
Right?
It does actually. His beard is getting more and more unkept in 2025. So actually,
no. Actually, I just trimmed it yesterday. I think it looks kind of nice. If you saw it in person, it's all like shaky.
Go to a barber, get it done properly. That's my suggestion. So,
I'm gonna Christian you to the show, Chrystia, with some ASMR.
This is a thing Jesse does that nobody appreciates.
Nobody
appreciates it.
They love it. No audience loves
Chrystia,
it.
Okay, I'm having a delicious coffee right now, possibly to be chased with some tea. Yeah.
Do you have a drink?
I've got water.
He has water.
Okay. Let's do a simultaneous sip.
3, 2, 1.
3, 2, 1.
Mine was a bit dramatic then, sorry.
You need the sounds. You need the audio for podcasts, right?
It needs to be like a 3D audio experience. So yeah. Chrystia, you
Chrystia, I'm kind of impressed that you actually listened to our show.
Yeah. Thanks for checking it out.
That's we weren't expecting, like, it's one thing to have someone reach out and want to be on our show because we've got Canada and in the past politics in our name, but for that to actually go back and listen to the show is different. So we appreciate that. Thank you. We'll count you amongst the 3.
Okay. Well, 1, your show is fun, so it's not like hard labor, and 2, homework.
Yeah, exactly.
One should always do one's homework.
Exactly, 100%. Yeah.
Agreed.
Well, you couldn't just turn up on a show without having listened to an episode because we could be saying horrible things that. And I'm glad that you did. I'm glad that you did check us out.
You should see the dirt we've dug up on you.
I'm ready, gentlemen. Look, I do question period on a regular basis.
I know. I was going to say, actually, that's a good question to start on. So you just had a tough week in Parliament. Poilievre's been, mouthing off, and. How do you relax on a Friday? Like you put a minute. This is a great question to start with. It's always a good icebreaker. So, like, what ice cream are you eating, and what are you kind of relaxing to watch?
Okay, so first of all, I actually can get into the back and forth in Parliament.
Okay.
Sometimes from 30,000 feet, I do recognize it is not. I recognize if my kids are sometimes in the gallery or their friends, they're like, oh my God, adults say that kind of stuff to each other. So I recognize it's not the most kind of enlightening and uplifting political exchange. But I don't mind getting into it. So I don't mind having a fight.
So you don't need to chill. You don't.
Well, no. So, but that's like point 1. Point 2.
Okay,
yes, I love to chill. And by the time I get to Friday night, I am usually exhausted.
Okay.
The good thing for me is, like, I travel around a lot in my job. Friday nights are usually at home. And as a family, we try to make Friday be an at-home night. And we try to have takeout food on Friday night. I like to cook other nights when I'm home because also healthier for the family. Yeah. But Friday night is our sacred Italian pizza takeout.
Nice.
Yeah.
And what do you watch, though, as a family? Are you like all kinds of stuff, or are you?
Well, see, here we're going to sort of disappoint you because we like to read.
That's not a disappointment at all.
And when we watch, our son, we have 3 kids, a 23, a 20, and a 15. And our 15-year-old son is in grade 10.
Okay.
really seeking to improve his French. And so when we watch films as a family, which actually we did on Sunday night, his French teacher likes them to watch films in French. So we tend to watch films or TV shows in French to help him with his French.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
We
good.
recently watched on Sunday night, we watched, let's see if I remember the title, Monsieur Batignolles, which is a French film about, I don't know if it's fictionalized or not, but it's about a French man who ends up helping to rescue 3 Jewish children during the Second World War and escapes with them to Switzerland. But it's like, they have challenges along the way, including between him and the kids. So that's
cool.
what we watched on Sunday night.
Oh, great. I once went to a French film festival in Paris, and they didn't subtitle because it was a French film festival in Paris. And so I sat there for hours just smiling and acting like an idiot. So,
I gotta ask, so your family is like, so you sit around and read, and then when it's time to really goof off, you sit around and you put on a French film to help learn French. So like I'm afraid that like one of your or more of your kids one of these days is going to go off on like a pilgrimage to discover what the meaning of fun is.
Oh, come on. We do have fun. We definitely have fun, but
Now, Timmy, sit down and read your dictionary. Don't you come back up from that room until you've read 20 pages.
okay, I'll tell you my guilty pleasure, but this is not shared by the kids. The kids mock me for this, okay? The kids and the husband mock me for this. I do read, and you are both men, so you might not be into this, but your producer may. I love romantacy fiction. That is my thing. Yes, I do. I love it. The more sort of blood, gore, dragons, I love that stuff.
Yes. There we go. See, my wife reads Christmas romantic kind of comedy.
I'm familiar with those.
All year round, just Christmas romantic comedy.
I can see that. I like the romantacy stuff because it has a little more fighting.
Yes.
The Christmas romantacy tends not to. The Christmas romance stuff tends not to, but like the romantacy, you have this sort of the gentle moments, but you also have the heroism, the conflict, and there's like a girl or a woman who's the fighting hero. So I love that stuff.
That's good.
Do you have a particular title in mind that you'd want to boast or just brag about, or not brag? I don't know. One of your favorites. What are give us something.
Give you something to read. Okay. Well, there are a few. So there's one series, and we were talking about your Alberta days, Jesse. So there's one written by an author in Calgary. I think it's called Inked in the Bone or Inked in Blood, maybe Inked in the Bone. It's Norse, humans and gods, and she's written the first book, and her next one is coming out this spring. So I really like that one, and I try to promote Canadian authors.
Yeah.
And then there is the Rebecca Yarrow Dragon one coming up, and I think it's called Onyx. Yeah, the Onyx is the third one. Onyx Storm. So I haven't bought Onyx Storm. I'm saving that. I'm saving Onyx Storm for after the leadership is done.
Yeah.
But I read the first two, and I actually, if I'm looking for an alternate career, I think I would be a very good book scout. Because I tend to find these books before they hit the bestseller list, and at a time when people, like respectable readers, think that they're not cool to read, I start reading them. So Game of Thrones, for instance, I read the whole series before it ever became like TV show.
Oh, me too. I love those books. And then the TV show came out and I was like, I'm not into it anymore.
I couldn't watch the TV show because I liked having the characters in my head and I didn't like having my own images of them be changed.
Exactly. There's a question that I have been desperate to ask you about since this opportunity, since your team reached out. And I want to understand your experiences with the KGB. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is
that makes it sound a little. Like Game of Thrones, KGB.
That's what I had. Exactly.
I think that's a very good transition.
Yeah, secret police.
Don't diss the guy who actually came into the studio this morning.
Yeah, Jesse. I'm dressed.
I stayed home to make sure you guys didn't get sick. Come on,
I put clothes on.
I could be there.
Like, are you wearing anything under that robe? We don't want to know.
I put clothes on.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but you, as a young exchange student, were an activist in Kiev and Ukraine behind the Iron Curtain during the USSR. And the USSR, because you were so effective as an activist, created a course to teach KGB agents about how disruptive a single person can be to the USSR. Is that true?
Seems broadly to be true.
That's incredible. How do you piss the KGB off so much?
Well, it didn't, it seems broadly to be true. They even gave me a code name, it turned out, which is Frida, which my kids love.
That's pretty cool.
But, it didn't quite, it didn't feel that way at the time.
Yeah.
I went there, I sort of set up an exchange for myself in 1988-89, so that shows how old I am. I was in university, and I set up an exchange to spend a year at the University of Kyiv. It was then the Soviet Union, so it was the Ukrainian SSR. And I thought, I had been studying Russian history and literature and Soviet studies. Perestroika and glasnost were starting to happen. In Hungary, you had goulash communism. And I just thought, instead of just studying it, why not go and see it?
Yeah, wow.
And improve my language. So I went there in the academic year 88-89. It was incredibly bleak. So whenever I'm having challenging times in my life, or if my children complain, I will tell them little stories about this, right? So to give you an example, we as students, if there was butter or there were sausages sold at the gastronome, like the grocery store, they would tell you and everyone would leave and go line up to get it. There was just food was not an easy thing to get. Like a new
iPhone. But for basic
essentials.
But
for eating. Yeah. Exactly. And the only thing that was plentiful and delicious was bread. And that was a lesson in how bad central planning is.
Yeah.
Because bread was so plentiful that people used it to feed their pigs. Right? Because there was this directive, thou shalt produce a lot of delicious bread so people don't really rebel and starve. But then instead of having the grain for the pigs, they'd have the bread. Anyway, it was a very...
Wow.
It taught me forever that communism and central planning don't work. And so, at university, young people can have these sorts of fantasies. And I'd always be just guys, I've lived in a centrally planned economy. Very bad idea. You can't get toothpaste. Tampons, don't even talk about it. Anyway, so it was like that. There were very few foreigners. When I say very few, maybe 10 Westerners.
Wow.
And I quickly became known to be someone who spoke Ukrainian and spoke English and had sort of access to the West. And although it was glasnost and perestroika, Soviet Ukraine was a much more repressive political system than in Moscow.
Is that because they were more independent historically?
See, you're so smart, Reese. Maybe your Welshness helps you understand the Ukrainians, right? No, they did.
That, Jesse? I'm smart. I'm the smart one.
Yeah, I heard it.
No, but the Soviets always knew that the Ukrainians were dangerous. And that the Ukrainians, that the yoke of Soviet communism sat uneasily on Ukraine. So it was an extra repressive regime. And people didn't have a lot of access to Western stuff. And so people sought me out. And it was actually it was very sad. In my classes, for the first couple of weeks, no one would talk to me. And then someone slipped me a note and said, "We hear you are a Ukrainian from Canada. Do you know the words of the Ukrainian national anthem? And could you write them down for us? Because it was illegal at the time. Yeah.
What?
The Ukrainian national anthem was illegal in Soviet Ukraine.
So it was the USSR.
Why?
Why? Because they wanted to repress and suppress the Ukrainians. As you can see, they're still trying to do it.
Right. Wow.
Right?
Okay.
So no, like it was a very brutally repressive regime. And look, like remember they had the famine in the 30s?
Yeah.
So anyway, so people sort of recognized that I could give them access to ideas and to the West. There was an organization, they're incredibly brave people called Memorial, which was about trying to revive historical memory.
Yeah.
And they had discovered that there was a Stalinist grave site outside Kyiv. And the particularly horrific thing is people had been butchered in Kyiv, like leaders.
So this was like a purge.
Yes, exactly. A purge that happened right at the beginning of the Second World War. So like so perverse that you would kill your best people as the war is starting. And that's why memory of it was repressed. But they found the gravesite and they found the people there who remembered as children having like blood on the dirt road as people were brought there to be buried. And they wanted to get the story out. And so someone found me. They're like, oh, she's Canadian. She speaks English. Maybe she can find some journalists. And I had this little directory from Moscow. It was called Who's Who in Moscow that had the phone numbers of all the reporters. And so there was a phone you could use in the dorm, and I just like called through, and I thought, okay, New York Times, that's a good newspaper. And I called up, and I was like, hi, I have a story
hello, New York
for you.
Times.
And actually, they came. Bill Keller.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, Bill Keller. He came to Kyiv, and I translated for him because the people in the village, they didn't really speak Russian or Ukrainian. They spoke this something called Surzhyk, which is Surzhyk. It's like what people in Russified areas of Ukraine who aren't that educated speak. So anyway, I translated for him, and they wrote a story.
Kind of like Newfoundlanders for us.
I refuse to accept that insult. Anyway, so I did these things, and
I lived in Newfoundland. I'm allowed to insult them.
We'll see if they agree with you.
Yeah, Jesse. That's a fight. That's a fight you don't want to pick.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's true. No, I don't want to fight.
Anyway, so like there were these incredibly brave people, and like we think about. At least I think about our own politics and our own challenges. And, it can be tiring to be politically active. But I think of those people I met in 88, 89 who would get beaten up and arrested for being political activists. I met people who had been political dissidents. Anyway, this was not something that the KGB thought was a good thing for this student to be doing. And it all came to a head when the last political dissident, the last political prisoner in the Soviet Union was actually a Ukrainian guy, a guy called Levko Lukyanenko. And he was in prison for a very long time. And Gorbachev released him because remember, this was like glasnost and perestroika, and we're great now.
I'm looking at Jesse. Jesse, do you know what those things are?
I have no idea what I've clocked out 20 minutes.
There's a sex angle in a minute, Jesse.
There we go.
Hang on. If you hang on,
he's taking his robe off.
There.
So Jesse, it was the relaxing of authoritarianism in the Soviet Union. So they were like, hey, we don't have to be like crazy on you all the time. We're going to chill a little bit. And that's me oversimplifying. Obviously.
No, but that's exactly it. And it was that.
What was that called again?
Glasnost, which means openness, and perestroika, which means rebuilding. And this is when, like, Gorbachev, everybody loved him. He was hero in the West, but it was still pretty bad in Ukraine. But one of the things was like, okay, well, if you're going to be doing that, you should probably release your political prisoners. So the last political prisoner was Ukrainian. His name was Levko Lukyanenko, and they released him. Didn't let him go into Kyiv. He had to go to a village. And at this point, I had some Ukrainian political activist friends, and they said, we want you to come and meet Levko Lukyanenko and he'll talk to you.
Oh, wow.
And then you will tell his story. And I was like, okay, I'll try. So
Were you like in your 20s at this point?
Yeah, I think I was.
No pressure.
Yeah, no, I think I was 20.
Oh, wow.
I was exactly 20. Yeah.
So can I ask, you weren't a journalist, you knew journalists.
Well, I sort of knew them because I phoned them up.
Right. So like when they asked you to tell this guy's story, did they mean they wanted you to translate it to like the New York Times, or like did they start to get to know you as a journalist?
They sort of had no idea, but like they were grasping at straws, and I was the straw that was there.
Yeah.
And I had like connected people, and like, it's hard in this hyper-connected age to really understand how cut off from the West people there were. But also there was an appetite in the West to understand what people were doing. I also got to know this group of photographers who like literally they just like found me and would take me to their apartments on weekends to show me photographs. And they were like, is this good?
Wow.
I'm like, I have no idea. And then I went to London over the Christmas holidays. I had an aunt living there. And I took a bunch of those photographs to the Independent. I went to I just had this little portfolio. I went to different newspapers. The editor, the Eastern European editor of the Independent, a guy I still know, Steve Crawshaw, saw the pictures, published them. I wrote like a little 300-word description. I think that was my first publication in like a real newspaper. And the very cool thing is two of the guys who took those photos, who were like nuclear engineers, photography was just a hobby, became professional photographers.
That's amazing.
One of them still works for the AP.
Are you saying they quit?
Well, like when the Soviet Union collapsed, it became a job. One of them still works for AP in Kyiv. His name is Yefrem Lukatsky. But anyway, so my KGB story. So they wanted me to meet Levko Lukyanenko, who's like a heroic figure. He became an ambassador. And like really, like he was like imprisoned for decades. So we went to the village. We talked to him. Very obviously interesting, also like horrific. And then we had to go back to Kyiv. And we got on a bus. They had dressed me up as like a Ukrainian village girl. So I'd be incognito.
So you had to go in disguise, so the KGB…
Sort of.
Oh, wow, okay.
I mean, like disguise-ish. Like I am not that different from a Ukrainian village girl. You know what I mean? Like it would just like wear different clothes.
I was going to say, as soon as you came in the room, I was just like, there's a Ukrainian village.
There you go. You're not the first to say that. Anyway, so there we are. We're on the bus traveling back to Kyiv. And I'm with a couple of university students who were like active, politically active. And they said to me, people on the bus said, there are some KGB guys who have been following us. They're on the bus and they're going to try to arrest you. So we're like, oh my God. At this point, it became serious. I was being arrested by the KGB could be bad.
It's not a good day.
But my friends knew, like the bus driver was a local guy.
Yeah.
And like all the local people were on our team, right? And so they explained to the bus driver. And so the bus stopped really quickly. We ran out of the bus and they slammed the door shut and kept on going and didn't let the KGB guys out. Actually, true fact. And then I think like
where do they drop
just
you
like
off?
on the side of the road. And then we hitchhiked back to town, back to our dorm. And I did get questioned either when I got back or the next day. And they were like, so did you meet Levko Lukyanenko? And I was like, no, I have no idea what you're talking about, because they had no proof.
Yeah.
But they then did say, I think at that point the Canadian embassy in Moscow got involved, and they were like, we think it is time for you to leave. So I felt that was correct.
Yeah, you should probably listen to the embassy when they tell you things like that.
Yeah. So then I left, but I promised Jesse a sex part. So I'll give you two sex aspects to this.
I never asked
Well,
for
you were
this.
getting bored. You were getting bored. So my
the only
two
way to keep
sex
his attention.
aspects.
I was joking.
They're not that sex, but they're sex adjacent. One was once I met these people, they asked me to bring them stuff like materials from the West. And so how do you smuggle that in? And
I didn't expect this story to go in this direction.
there, but I'm just telling you. Okay, so like printed material from the West and like, parts for photocopiers were like a big deal at the time. And so what I did was, and this was actually my mother's advice, and my mother was an amazing, amazing woman.
She was Ukrainian as well.
She was Ukrainian Canadian.
Yeah. That was your connection. Yeah.
Yeah. So she said, buy a Playgirl magazine and put it in your suitcase on top of the material. And the border guards, like they're Soviet, right? They'll be so embarrassed by this that they won't be able to like look through and like put all your panties there and stuff. And so that's what I did. And that's how I got stuff across the border.
So they were so intimidated by like topless men that they couldn't.
There you go.
Wow.
That's called girl power.
And it worked.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
And
It actually worked.
That's
Intimidate them with
amazing.
their own sexuality. There we go.
Just store all the secret codes in between
Exactly.
the pages.
Yeah.
That's an incredible story. That's Reese. I'm glad you brought it up because like that was just it was riveting. Honestly, you didn't have to involve the sex part, but I'm glad you did too. It was a nice ending.
Well, you were complaining about the glasnost in perestroika, Jesse. So
Yeah.
I took pity on you.
I think it's because you didn't know what those two things were, but now you you learned something today.
You two were bonding. And I wasn't.
You
I felt
fuck.
it.
It's hard to be the person who's not in the room.
Exactly. We don't have a huge amount of time with you, but the other thing I was desperate to ask was Donald Trump. He calls you the killer? Now,
It's true.
do you take that as a compliment? Because it's about negotiation. He doesn't like your negotiation style, or he finds it intimidating.
I think he doesn't like the results,
He doesn't like
which are good for Canada.
okay. Good.
Yeah. I have a question about.
Oh, go
Donald
for it.
Trump, because you've met him in person. Yeah.
Absolutely.
What does he smell like?
Oh my God. I have no idea.
You didn't get that close.
I haven't sniffed him.
He doesn't smell. I was kind of picturing he might smell like a 1990s rec room basement, like just flat pop cheese and like desperation.
I guess I'm
That's
not
my-
that
was my guess.
olfactory a person, but no.
Ah, damn. I was really hoping you could help us with that. Reese and I were really curious what Donald Trump smells like. I have a question for you. I've got a few questions. If we've got
Go for it, Jesse. Go on. No, you go on. That was the main thing I wanted to talk to you
The
about.
killer point?
I wanted to ask you. Oh, killer, definitely. Like,
He said it, the first time he said it, I walked into a room ahead of the other Canadians and he was there and he sort of looked at me and he said, "Oh, I see the killer is coming in first." And then he sort of smiled. But like in Trumpland, that's a positive.
that's a compliment. From
That's
him.
a compliment.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
a compliment.
He
Yeah.
doesn't like weakness, does he? But he obviously sees you as a strong
I think
negotiator.
he detests weakness. And I think for Donald Trump, weakness is a provocation.
Yeah.
And
And an opportunity for him. Definitely.
exactly. No. And I think like his style, and this is not only what I've observed, but I've talked to a lot of people who are close to him and who support him. And, what you see about him is he believes in a maximalist strategy. So he pushes.
What does that mean?
So like he started out in real estate. And to take an example, his idea would be if he has a building to sell and he thinks the market value of the building is $1 million, he will go out and say, "This is the greatest building ever. It is worth $10 million. Maybe he'll say it's worth $100 million. And people might say, well,
It's just
that's
shack in the
absurd. It's only
backyard.
worth $1 million. His attitude is, I'll ask for $10 million. I'll ask for $100 million. Does it hurt me at all? Worst that can happen is people say no. And best that can happen is some sucker is like, oh, okay, I won't pay you $10 million, but I'm really going to bargain you down. I'll pay you just $2 million.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
meanwhile, he's privately laughing because he got double the value. That's his negotiating style. And it is ask for the maximum and also beat up the other guy as much as you can. Get the other guy to negotiate against himself.
Yeah.
And I think it's very obvious when you see how he's been behaving in the world. And then sort of the third thing that goes along with all of that, the reason what is required if you're going to pursue those strategies is you have to not be bothered by contradicting yourself.
Yeah.
And you have to be prepared to...
Which he does constantly.
Well, exactly, right? You have to be prepared to do that. And you have to
Constantly.
be prepared to change your position really, really fast. Reese, do you know the Fleet Street expression, reverse ferret?
No, I don't.
You don't know the reverse
No.
ferret? Okay. Well, the reverse ferret, see, I'm dating myself as a Fleet Street editor and reporter, but there was the reverse ferret. I think this was invented in the Sun. A reverse ferret is when someone, generally a politician, has to do a reverse ferret. So totally turn around their position. And Trump is a master of the reverse ferret. And that's what makes all of it come together, right? Like, because a normal person would say, I can't ask for $10 million for this $1 million building because I'll look ridiculous when I only sell it for $1 million or 1.1 or whatever. Trump doesn't care. He's like, I can change my mind 10 times a day, no problem. And
he'll be like, I never asked for $10 million for that. What are you talking about?
Exactly. That is see, you have got it down, Jesse, and that's right. And so we just, I think as a country, we have to recognize the style that we're dealing with. We have to recognize this is a disruptor. This is someone who does not believe in the rules, and this is someone who intentionally seeks to disrupt the rules, disrupt the ways that the system works, and even that human relations work. And we have to not wring our hands about it and say, oh, this is so yucky and so bad that he's doing it this way, which it is. But we have to say, what is the negotiating style? And what is the approach that is best suited to dealing with this?
Well, you can see that game plan with the whole 51st state thing at the moment. It's just, it's exactly that game plan.
We only have a few
Jesse, do you want to
minutes
ask one of your questions before we run out of time?
Yeah, so we've talked about the USSR and we've talked about the states. I would like to talk about
go for it. It's relevant.
From some myself, who I famously do not follow politics. It's just Reese has dragged me through a podcast for 4 years. So I was wondering, Chrystia, in the style, for about 2 minutes, in a style of a romance fantasy novel, could you describe to me, because I don't really understand what happened genuinely, could you just explain it to me as if I'm a 5-year-old being read this fairy tale story? Explain to me what happened between you and Trudeau that ended in you resigning from your position, because I don't really get it. And if you speak big political words, I still won't get it. So I need it in this fantasy side.
Ideally with a pop-up site on the pages.
Yes.
Well, you don't need any big political words. I wrote my resignation letter myself. And I think
fantasy.
But seriously, Jesse, and I think I intended to be very direct and clear in that letter. And what I explained was that I believed I had lost the confidence of the Prime Minister and that confidence was necessary to continue doing my job. And I also explained, which I believe even more today than I did at that moment on the 16th of December, that President Trump was posing an existential threat to our country, that this was the central challenge, and that all of our politics had to be organized around that, and that therefore we had no time and no money for political gimmicks, and that for that reason I couldn't go along with them, and that we had to focus on Canada being ready to stand up to Trump and to fight Trump. And I'll tell you the very specific moment that became kind of starkly, painfully clear to me. And that was the day I think it was November 25th when Trump threatened the 25% across the board tariffs against Canada. Up to that point, we didn't know like where we would fit in the Trump disruptive worldview. But when he said that, it was clear to me that he had decided to go after Canada to kind of make an example of Canada for the rest of the world, really to try to beat us up, pour encourager les autres kind of thing. And
I don't know what that meant, but okay.
You do. You do, to encourage the others.
I don't know.
And it was clear to me then, and it is more clear to me now than ever, that, and this is where your romantacy thing comes in, Jesse, because we as a country, like we do have this moment when our whole country has to be kind of heroic.
Yeah.
And we do have to stand up to Trump. The 51st state stuff, we cannot treat it like a joke. He keeps on repeating it. His people keep on repeating it. And I think that Canada and Canadians are being magnificent now.
Yeah.
Like Canadians have been really clear, unanimously and spontaneously. They're like, no, we're not going to be the 51st state. Thank you very much. We are going to buy Canadian. We don't want our governments to be buying stuff from the U.S. We love our country very much, and we are not going to capitulate. I see that across the whole country. So like the whole country is engaged in this romantacy heroic quest. And
the cover of that book for me, is you with a flaming sword on the back of a Pegasus. There we go.
I would prefer it to be. I'd prefer it to be a dragon.
Okay.
And my grandfather did ride in the Calgary Stampede. I like riding horses, and I want a whole bunch of Canadians, preferably maybe young women, to also be riding horses and dragons.
I think that's a good realistic vision for Canada.
It is.
Thank you so much for your time. I know you've got to go and catch a flight, but sorry, Jesse.
No, I was just going to thank you for the explanation. I finally understand what's going on. I'm a little sad that there were no dragons in your explanation.
I offered a dragon at the end.
There we go.
That's true. Yeah. We did. Okay.
So, Chrystia, there was an awesome final message, and we really appreciate your time. And good luck with the campaign. It sounds like you're very busy all over the place. So, best of luck.
Thank you very much. I am busy. I'm having fun.
Do you have any final words or a call to action to our listeners?
Yeah, I do. I do. So we've been talking about heroic people in the Soviet Union. We've talked a little bit about romantacy heroines.
Yes.
Now is a moment, I think, that is a moment of crisis, but also a moment of opportunity for Canada and for all Canadians. It is a moment for national heroism and for individual heroism. I'm running to be leader of the Liberal Party and the next Prime Minister of Canada because I really get it. I get that this moment matters, and I am ready to stand up and fight for Canada, but I can't do it alone. I want to kind of harness that energy that all Canadians have. And for a start, I need people to vote for me on March 9th in the Liberal leadership race. So please do.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Don't run off to Canada. It's so boring there.